others who might be tuning in around the country and really possibly even around the world, as with this new technology, Zoom, and these virtual tours, the ability to bring you Eretz Israel into your family room, since you cannot come here today. The borders of Israel are still closed. I want to wish you a heartfelt welcome and also a debt of gratitude for allowing me to do what I love, which is to talk about Eretz Israel, to bring Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, all of its Kedusha, all of its history, and really for me, most importantly, all of its inspiration, because the entire land of Israel is just filled with so much inspiration, philosophy, education that we can bestow upon ourselves and upon our children. And a trip to Israel, as many of you I'm sure know who have been here in the past, a trip to Israel is a trip that will leave an indelible mark on your family for generations. So again, thank you to Eitz Chaim for inviting me to do this tour for all of you at this time. I'm just going to throw out right now, obviously, COVID-19 here in Israel, we're pretty good. We're pretty careful. Most people you're going to see will be wearing masks. Uh, there have been closures in the past. There's been complete lockdowns where we haven't been able to leave our house more than 500 meters, less than a mile. And so I do have my mask with me. Right now, you can see I'm in the Shetach, I'm in the field here, the top of the hill of Chevron. That's why I have it off. What we're going to do throughout the tour is, if in the chat, if you have a question, we're not too sure how many questions we'll be able to field at the end. So what you can do in the chat is just put your questions out there, and the rabbi will look through those and he'll ask me those at the end. And if we have an opportunity just to open everybody's mics up and people can throw out questions, we'll do that as well. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce myself. David Sussman. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I've been living here in the Holy Land for the last 20 years. I can't believe it. I've been a guide for about 12 of those years, and I've worked with Eitz Chaim on various trips to Israel that they run, especially the Momentum JWRP trips. I've known Rabbi Avi for quite some time, and I'm sure there's many of you who are tuning in right now who've been on a tour of mine in person in the past. And I would hope that most of the people who tuned in last week, as we traveled along the path of the patriarchs, which is the road that connects the city of Chevron to the city of Yerushalayim, to the city of Jerusalem, that you are all with us here today as well. Because what an amazing day we have here in one of our holy cities. And Israel's known for having 4 holy cities, but oftentimes when I say that there are 4 holy cities here in Israel, people sometimes will tend to forget that all of Israel's holy. Every square inch is holy. In fact, just walking 3 feet in Israel is considered a mitzvah, a very important, wonderful, powerful mitzvah that you are all partaking in today, albeit virtually. So what are those 4 holy cities? Well, first and foremost, the holy city, the only city that really is like elevated beyond all other places here in Israel, and Israel's elevated than all other places here in the world, and that is the city of Jerusalem. Second to Jerusalem is right here, the city of Chevron. And I'll just mention the other 2 right now. We also have the city of Sfat, which somebody mentioned. Let's do a tour of the city of Sfat. I'd love to do that sometime in the future. You guys will decide where you want to travel on our next tour. And you also have the city of Tiberias, which sits on the Kinneret, which is widely known in English as the Sea of Galilee. And they're all holy for one reason or another, for an important mark that they left on Jewish history. Chevron, second to Jerusalem, the second holiest city in the world, correlates to the element of earth. And the reason why, it's right here in the city that we find the burial place of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, what is known as Marata Machpelah, or in English, the double cave. And when we get down to Marata Machpelah, which Phil, my amazing cameraman who's with us here today, is zooming in so you can see it from afar. And as we're zooming in, and you can see the building over there known as Marata Machpelah, the double cave, the burial place of our forefathers and foremothers, you can see that the entire city, the modern city of Hebron today, surrounds the Marata Machpelah. But when that was purchased originally by Abraham 3,800 years ago, that was in the fields of Chevron. If that's in the fields, where was the city? Well, in ancient times, you needed to protect yourself. And the way you protected yourself was by building your city on top of a hill. I'm not too sure how many of you out there have ever played the game King of the Hill, but when I was younger, that was a popular game for us. Somebody would stand on a mound and 4 or 5 of your friends would swing around this way. 4 or 5 of your friends would try and knock you off. And of course, you had the advantage, right? What was the advantage? They'd be coming up and you could just kick them and punch them and push them down because you are higher up. This same tactic, the same strategy still exists today. Why does Israel have such an incredible military? Because we have one of the best air force, if not the best air force, as far as training and technology is concerned, than any other nation in the world. And we are by far superior than any other country here in the Middle East. So we control the skies. We're still king of the hill. We're still up on high. So the city of Chevron was originally built on top of the mountain, one of the Judean mountains that you can see all around us here. And it's the hill that I'm standing on right now. I'm actually at the peak or almost at the peak of the mountain right now, which means I'm actually sitting in the ancient city of Chevron, where Abraham purchased Marat Machpelah, the double cave, which was in the field of Chevron, which is down below, which you just saw. Phil, zoom in to that building, which is now behind me. Okay. Now, Chevron is special for a number of reasons. And there's a tremendous amount of history here, and we're going to touch upon a lot of it. However, for me, one of the most incredible aspects of Chevron is this is the one place that we know with certainty, both archaeologically speaking, as well as historical, right? What's history, right? As well as the written word, right? History is about the written word of many different nations preserving their story. And what is our story? Our story is the Tanakh, right? Which is an acronym for the 5 books of Moses, for the writings of the prophets, and the writings of like King Solomon and David Melech, King David, as well as the scribes that talked about the return from the Babylonian exile. We call it the Tanakh. In English, it's called the Bible, right? That's our word. That's our history. And we know without a doubt from our history, our written word, and archaeology, that here in Chevron, all of our patriarchs, all of our matriarchs, our founding families all resided right here, somewhere on this hilltop. In fact, it might have just been here in this olive grove that you see behind me that Abraham had pitched his tent, right? Abraham wasn't from Eretz Israel. He was from a place called Ur Kasdim, which is in what is today Iraq. And he received a nevuah, he received a prophecy at the age of 75 that he was to leave his father's house. He was to leave the land in which he was from, and that he should go to the place, and God tells him that I will show you. He will bring him to the place that I will show you. He didn't even say, I'm going to bring you here. He said, don't worry, I'll tell you. You'll know when you get there. How much emunah, how much faith, how much trust does that take to understand that inspiration that he had in that moment of prophecy, of nevuah, that says, okay, I'm going to leave my father's house. But not only that, I'm going to leave everything that I've ever known, all my preconceived notions, and I am going to test myself, and I am going to leave my land. I'm going to cross over to the other side. And when I get there, I'll know. Hashem, God, will tell me. I'll feel that moment of inspiration, of that nevuah, of that prophecy, and I'll know through that Ruach HaKodesh, through that divine providence, that I have arrived here. Well, when he arrives here in Eretz Israel and he knows this is the place, guess what happens? There's a great famine. There's a drought. There's no food. And he's forced to flee with his wife, Sarah, as well as his nephew, Lot. And Lot is famous from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot, Sarah, and Abraham go down to Egypt. And when they return, they are very, very wealthy. And because they're wealthy and because their communities, their independent communities, the community of Lot and the community of Abraham have grown significantly, some of the exterior elements of both those communities began to quarrel with one another over land. Go figure. They started to quarrel over land. And Abraham does something amazing. He says, Lot, you go wherever you want, and I'll go in the opposite direction. We'll be friends. We'll still be in contact. We have WhatsApp. No worries. There's Zoom. We'll be in touch. We're still friends. I'm not rejecting you, but let's not quarrel. We're family. And we know this sentiment of Abraham was true because shortly after that, Lot is kidnapped, and there's this great world war of the time, the war of the 5 kings against the 4 kings, and Lot is captured. And who comes to his rescue? His uncle, Abraham. So he meant that. And so Lot goes to a very, very lush area. And we read in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the Bible, that Abraham comes here to the city of Chevron, and he pitches for the first time a permanent tent. And it will be here that Yitzhak is born. It is here that Yaakov, Jacob is living as well. So all of the patriarchs and all of the matriarchs lived here at some point in their life. But it is considered one of the holy cities because this is the place that they are buried as well. But there's so much more to that story. The burial of our matriarchs and our patriarchs, the Marata Machpelah, the double cave. Why is it a double cave? Who else is buried there? What happened there? Why did Abraham want that cave so badly? And we're going to talk about that as we descend from the ancient city of Chevron to the modern city of Chevron and all the way to Marata Machpelah to the double cave. But our patriarchs and our matriarchs aren't the only ones who are buried here. There are other tzaddikim who are buried here as well, other righteous individuals. And I want to introduce you to 2 of them right now. So we're just going to head on down. It's a little wobbly here with these ancient stones. You can see I'm literally amongst ruins here that date back over 1,000 years. In fact, there's an ancient Beit Medrash, a place of Torah study that's just located just over there that is now being renovated by a rabbi of the old city by the name of Ben Packer. And he brings students who are on birthright, who want to take part in the rebuilding of Eretz Yisrael, such an important mitzvah. And he brings them here when they extend their birthright trips, when those used to happen. And he's cleaned out this ancient ruin, this ancient Beit Medrash, and he's once again returned it. And people are actually studying here. In fact, if this gentleman doesn't mind being on camera for a second, you can see right here, you can see this gentleman in here. There's actually a modern day Beit Medrash in there that's been completely repaired or renovated. And there are people who are learning and praying here 24/7. Why not down below, Marata Mechpelah? Well, it's a great question, right? So right behind me in Hebrew, you can see it says, for those who can read, Kever, Yishai, Ve, and Ruth, right? The tomb of Jesse and Ruth. Who are these individuals? Well, Jesse is the father of King David. And Ruth is the grandmother of Jesse, which means Ruth is King David's great grandmother. And it was actually David Amelech, King David, who reinterred, they were buried elsewhere, reinterred their bones here in the city of Chevron, because we cannot forget that the kingship of David Amelech, King David, begins here in the city of Chevron. Before he, just go ahead, turn yourselves on mute if that's possible. Some people just tuned in, you got to turn yourself on mute, thank you. That before he moves his throne and the capital of the 12 tribes to Yerushalayim, so that our physical capital should be in the same place as our spiritual capital, right? Jerusalem is our eternal spiritual capital. And thank God today it is also our political capital as well. Before he moves to Jerusalem, he's here in Chevron for 7.5 years. But let's just talk a little bit about his great grandmother, because this is one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible. For me, this is one of the most important lessons that we can derive from Judaism. And there are probably an infinite amount of lessons that we can derive from there. You know, when I grew up, my parents, I grew up in a I always say a glot reform family, and people usually chuckle. You know, I find that a lot of people call themselves Reformed today because they go to synagogue maybe twice a year. And I say, that's not Reform, that's secular, my friend. We were actually really Reformed. We went to shul, we went to a Reformed temple at least twice a month, and oftentimes, you know, every week. We were very active in our shul. And I forgot where I was going with that, but there you go. So so Ruth, well, you know what I was going to say, Phil? Tell me if you do.
You're just bringing it back to Ruth.
I was bringing it back to Ruth. Great, thank God. So Ruth is one of the most important stories in Judaism, and it's filled with Judaism with this concept of mindfulness, of being in the moment and being present. And the story of Ruth is that story. So who's Ruth? So let's go back again to Abraham and his nephew Lot. Lot goes to Sodom and Gomorrah, which was a place that was completely corrupt of morality. I don't even know if they ever even had a moral compass that went wayward. They were the worst of the worst. In fact, Abraham pleads to Hashem not to destroy this city because there's got to be at least 10 tzaddikim there. There's got to be at least 10 righteous people there. And Hashem's like, I'm sorry, my friend. There are no righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, and Hashem is going to destroy it. But who lives there? Abraham's nephew. And Abraham's nephew spent a lot of years with Abraham and learned a thing or two from his uncle. And he performed some mitzvot and some good deeds, and he merited to be saved from this utter destruction. And these angels visit Lot and tell him to flee the land, to flee the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when you're leaving, just remember, don't look back. And that alone is a great message. Don't look back and just look forward, right? Remember our past. You have to remember your past. You have to remember your history, but you need to bring chidushim. You need to bring newness. You need to bring freshness. You need to be moving forward. Don't dwell in the past. Remember the past, but always allow the past just to propel you forward. That alone is a great message, but that's not the message I want to share. Lot's wife can't resist. She turns and looks back at the destruction. She turns to a pillar of salt. She dies. Lot is now with his two daughters, and they think they're the last ones around. And I don't want to get too graphic here, but I'll just say that Lot's daughters get their father inebriated, and they have some relations because they want to repopulate the world, and both of them give birth to sons. One of them looks at the son and is so proud of this ancestral relationship, the most forbidden relationship there is in the entire Tanakh. And we know that there are permissible relationships and there are relationships that are not permissible. And this is the highest of the not permissible. Father and a daughter and a child, and she names that child Moab, Me'av, from my father. Ugh. Like, we don't even need the Torah to tell us that that's not okay, right? I mean, that's the grossest of the gross. Yet they have this relationship. The son is born Moab. He starts a nation that becomes a great, like, not great as in like they were wonderful, but a very big, powerful nation during the days of the Bible, pre-Jews entering into the land of Israel. And they do many, many hideous acts against the Jewish people as well. They're constantly trying to corrupt us. But yet from this corrupt nation comes a woman who sees truth and reality for what it is and says, I want to be a part of the Jewish nation. And I realize that there can only be one God and one creator. Remember, everybody's pagans back then, except those who've been affected by Abraham and his people. And she converts to Judaism, and she becomes part of the Jewish nation. She marries a man by the name of Boaz. They have a son by the name of Yishai, who has a son by the name of David HaMelech, who's the epitome of mankind, is somebody who we look up to. And from this ancestral relationship, this hideous past, comes the seed of the Mashiach, Messiah, the seed of Messiah. What an amazing turn of events, that from something that's so forbidden came something that was so incredible. What's the lesson there? Is that it doesn't make a difference who your parents are, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents. It doesn't even make a difference what you did 10 years ago, 10 minutes ago, 10 seconds ago, an iota of a second ago. The thing that matters the most in Judaism is the here and the now. Where are you now? Where's your mind focused to? What are you doing with your time? We have a limited amount of time, 120 years. We should all be blessed to live 120 years and to move to the next world peacefully, unless Messiah, of course, comes first, and then we're all going to live forever. Be'ezrat Hashem. So we have a limited amount of time. What are you all doing right now? Think to yourself right now, what are you all doing right now? And which direction are you traveling in? Which direction are you moving in? And what can you do with your time, whether it's today, this week, next week, this month, this year, and of course, the legacy of your lifetime. And that is the story of Ruth, who is the great grandmother of King David, who ruled here in the city of Chevron the first 7.5 years of his life. So come, we're going to leave from this area and we're going to head down a little bit. As I said, we're at the top of the hill right now. We're going to head down. The sun's already setting here in Eretz Yisrael. We are just past 5 o'clock. And I know that at Shki, I know it's the time, the changing of the dates, right? Because we go from, the day changes in the Jewish calendar at night, because we are, because I just heard the Muslims do their call to, watch out, heard the Muslims do their call to prayer. And the call to prayer for the Muslims who pray 5 times a day at this hour, they do it right at Shkia. So we know that this is now the changing of the time. Why don't we switch around? I don't want you falling. Stop. There you go. Thanks. Got some beautiful olive trees that are growing over here. Usually got a little pen right here. There's oftentimes a donkey who's roaming this area. And on the other side of this this metal fence right here is you have a military unit that's stationed here as well, protecting, unfortunately, the 3% of Chevron that Jews are allowed in. The other 97%, there's very holy places, very important biblical places in the other 97% as well. But the Y Accords, which was signed by Bibi Netanyahu during his first reign as prime minister way back when, and I think it was 93, we gave over 97% of the city of Hebron to the Palestinian Authority, and 3% is completely under control of the Israeli government. So I just go watch my head. A lot of barbed wire over here, as this is the military unit, and we'll probably see some of the soldiers, usually elite soldiers, oftentimes from the paratroopers unit, Sant Chanim, here in Israel, who are stationed here. And I have no doubt we'll pass by one of the soldiers, and maybe we'll have the opportunity to speak with them as well. Top of the hill, half this building over here is occupied by Jews, half of it is occupied by Arabs. So there is some element of coexistence here. We got a nice, big, beautiful Jewish building over here, which was built, unfortunately, after a terrible terrorist attack, again, during the Y Accords, right after the Y Accords. And Bibi Netanyahu, who was in power at that time, gave permission to build this building. And I'll go into that story a little bit in just a moment. Just going down this little footpath over here. This is great. They installed these great lights. So before I even talk about what we're looking at behind me, I have to mention that here in Israel, you cannot dig 5 feet in the ground, less, without finding something that belonged to one of your great grandparents, however many grades ago, because the fact of the matter is we don't know when our families left Israel. Maybe it was during the Roman period, maybe it was during the Crusader period, maybe it was the Arab period, maybe they left during the First Temple period, Second Temple period, maybe for financial reasons, maybe for learning, maybe for Chijuchim, they were looking for a wife. So, there are lots of different reasons that maybe our families left here in Eretz Yisrael. Most likely, most of our families left during the Roman period, between 1,700 years ago and 2,000 years ago. But you dig here and you're going to find something. You're going to find a pottery shard. You're going to find the walls of an ancient house. And when they were building the foundations of the large building behind me, they struck archaeological gold. And what am I talking about? They found a First Temple period community right behind me equipped with a grain silo. You can see right here, this big pit you can see down here. This is where they would store their grains. And we know that this was a First Temple period Jewish settlement by the way that they constructed their homes. Israeli homes, Jewish homes during the First Temple period, unlike the other people who are also living here in Israel, the Plishtim or the Canaanites or various pagans who may have drifted into this area, they built differently. Every community builds in their own way. The Jewish settlement was always with these, each house had 4 rooms built in a very distinct way. And we find that over here. But not only that, we also have found inscriptions, clay inscriptions that talk about the king of Chevron, that talk about the city of Chevron, spelt the way that we spell it today. And just an incredible find. But this isn't the best of it. Just come with me a little bit over here. And let me just blow your mind for a minute. You can see a nice little playground over here. These homes that you can see here are prefab homes. They're what you would call trailers. This is a Jewish trailer park. Go figure, right? Probably don't have too many of those in Jacksonville, I'm reckoning. And these trailers were brought here in the 80s when Likud was in power, which is, historically the right-wing political party. The standard left-wing party at that time was Labor. Those were the 2 major parties. And then you had smaller parties. Today, Labor's not so big, but Likud is the biggest, and Likud has the premiership, and that's the party of Benjamin Netanyahu. But these were brought here at the end of Likud's reign back in the 80s, soon after the first Lebanon War. And the activists here who were settling the areas of Judea and Samaria, the disputed territories, I'm not going to go into it. I did talk about the disputed territories when we did the Path of the Patriarchs, but anybody who wants to know why I call it the disputed territories, not the occupied territories, not Judea and Samaria, I'm more than happy to answer those questions to you personally. Rabbi Avi has my email address, and please reach out to me for any more in-depth explanation of anything I'm talking about. Please reach out to me. But anyways, when Likud found those activists who want to settle here in Chevron, our ancient city, pleaded, give us the right to build some. And the Likud party said, you got 24 hours. Whatever you can do in 24 hours, it's yours, right? I don't even think we could probably get a, I don't even know what you call it in English, a kablan, a contractor to call you back in 24 hours, right? 24 hours, they brought 7 trailers here and dropped them down that have been lived in ever since. However, there was an 8th, and the 8th was on the crane and it was sitting up high, and it hadn't been lowered yet. When the 24 hours stopped, the army was there. They shot, the gun in the air, like at a race. Shot the gun in the air. Everything stops right now. But there was an 8th trailer that hadn't been dropped yet. With 10 more minutes, it would have been down. So what do you do with this 8th trailer? Is it considered to be on the car? Is it considered to be on the land or not? And so there was a huge debate in the Knesset that lasted weeks. And believe it or not, it was the left-wing party that quoted the Gemara, the oral Torah, and quoted Jewish halakha, right? Halakha, oftentimes translated as Jewish law, but it really comes from the word holech, which means to go. And so halakha doesn't necessarily mean Jewish law. It really means the way of the Jew, the way that the Jew sees the world, the way that we decipher right from wrong. And he used halakha that said anything that's 20 amot, which is like basically 60 feet, but anything that's 20 amot above the ground, it's not considered it's on the ground. And if it's below 20 amot, it's considered it was on the ground. And it was just over this 20 amot, this 60 feet above the ground. And so they decided in the Knesset and the vote that it wasn't on the car, it wasn't on the land, and you can't have the 8th trailer. So there were 7 trailers that stood here for about 15 years until unfortunately there was a terrorist attack. And a great rabbi was killed in one of these trailers. Somebody opened up fire and shot through these, very light walls, trailers after all. And the rabbi was killed. And a very famous story, Benjamin Netanyahu is prime minister, and he comes here to pay a condolence call, a shiva call. And part of the law here in Israel, if anybody's been affected by terrorism, the family is, I don't know what the right expression is, but is given some type of monetary value as a condolence from the nation, from the people, from the government. And she took this very large sum of money, this check that was, a publicity stunt for Bibi Netanyahu, and he gives it to him, and all the cameras are rolling, and people are taking pictures, and she took it, and she says, "You cannot buy my condolence with money." She rips up the check, she throws it on the ground. She goes, "You want to console my heart? Allow us to build over here. Allow us to build a building in which I can have a Bet Midrash, I can have a house of Torah study, and to tell them that you kill one Torah giant, I will produce 10 more." And that's when they got the permission to build the large building that you see behind me. Bibi Netanyahu gave them the permission, and you have about 20 apartments in this building, 20 more families that are living here. And you found the archaeology down below that you saw already. But this is what is amazing, is what we found here. Archaeology is not a science, but it kind of is. Archaeology uses carbon dating, it uses techniques of comparison, pottery from one site to another, places that we found dates, places that we didn't find dates. And the archaeologists, not the rabbis, the archaeologists, the scientists, have proven that these stairs that you can see ascending upwards date back roughly about 4,000 years. And that the wall you see on the left also dates back 4,000 years. Now, the wall on the right is a later wall. So the staircase you see probably extended more to the right and didn't become more narrow at the top. It was probably very wide because this was the main stairway that led to the city gates of the ancient city of Chevron, which was a Hittite, right? Another biblical nation, a Hittite city that was ruled by this mayor by the name of Ephron. And Ephron, the ruler, is whom Abraham purchased the Mata Machpelah, the double cave, to bury his wife, Sarah. And just to paint that picture for you, you could just imagine Abraham is here and he sees Ephron and he says, "Hey, you know that cave all the way out there in the distance in that field that basically nobody's using over there? I would like to purchase it from you so that I can bury my beloved wife, Sarah." And Ephron is like, "Listen, you want to buy something from me? You're a prince of God. Like, who am I next to you? Who are we next to you? Take it for free. Take it for free. Let's be on good terms." But Abraham says, "No, I don't want you to give it to me. I don't want there to be any question whatsoever. I want the deed and I want to pay a fair price for it." A fair price. Abraham didn't pay a fair price. Abraham ended up paying like an exorbitant amount of money, 400 shekel, right? Not like today we call them a shekel too, ancient money. But what is shekel? Comes from shekel, which means a weight. 400 weight of silver, which was like millions and millions of dollars back then. This is where the purchase took place. All business dealings in the ancient world would have taken place by the city gate so that there would be witnesses. And so, my friends, when you come here with your families, when you come here on a trip with Eitz Chaim, and you come here to the city of Chevron, you get to see, you get to touch, you get to hear, you get to use all of your five senses to touch not just history, but you get to touch your history. Because when you tap into the Tanakh, when you tap into the Bible, right? Tanakh, again, Hebrew, an acronym for the Bible in English, watch out, for the Bible in English, when you tap into the Bible here, you're not just tapping into history, you're not just tapping into your history. What you're really doing is you're reading and tapping into the diary of your great, 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 great grandparents. Because all of you should have no doubt at all in your minds that your great, 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 however many greats ago, parents were here and were active participants in the stories that you read. And right now, we are at one of the most exciting times in reading the Torah portion, the weekly Torah portion, the book of Genesis, Bereshit. We're only about 6 chapters in, 6 stories in, 6 parshas in, and they are fascinating. We go from creation, we go from the flood of Noah, we go to the birth of Abraham and his Nevuah and Lech Lecha, and coming into the land of Israel, and the trials and tribulations, and the birth of Isaac, and now Jacob and Esau, and the fighting between them, and Yaakov has just fled to his uncle's house, Lavan, in the north, and next week he's going to be, or in 2 weeks, he's going to be coming back down, back to Eretz Yisrael. This is the time, if you want to ask Rabbi Avi, and there's many different sources, and I can help you with that as well, to listen to a half-hour podcast on the Parsha, so that whatever it is you're doing, can you just mute yourself? Somebody just came on. Thank you so much. That you can go ahead and just tap into that a little bit. So whatever you're doing on Friday night, whether it's going to shul, whether it's going here, whether it's going there, having your dinner, that you can just break for a minute, put sports aside, put politics aside, and say, let's just talk a little bit about our grandparents from way back when and learn a story or two that we can inspire ourselves to be better next week. Because that's what it's all about. We want to refine ourselves and become better. So Yalla, let's go. What we're going to do right now is we're actually going to head into my car and we're going to drive down and a little bit through the city of Chevron. We're going to take a stop at a place called Beit Hadassah. It's actually the first Hadassah Hospital here in Israel. And we're going to stop there. We're going to talk a little bit. Oh, just go ahead and mute yourself, please. We're going to talk a little bit of these, I hate to call them riots because it really weren't riots, but we're going to talk a little bit of what's known as the 1929 Massacre. That's really a better way of describing it. And we'll then move on to liberation of Chevron in 1967, and then end up at Marat Machpelah. Shalom, toda rabah. אנחנו עושים זום טור לבית כנסת בג'קסונוויל. אתה מדבר אנגלית אולי? כן? מה שם שלך? Yonatan. We have Yonatan here, right? We just talked about David HaMelech. Yonatan was David HaMelech's best friend. He was the son of the first king of Israel, Shaul HaMelech. And Yonatan, how old are you? 21. So you must be getting out of the army soon. Did you sign up for longer? No, so soon. Okay, please God, you should finish your service in full health. So after your service here in Chevron, so how long have you been in Chevron already?
This is the first week.
First week.
Yeah, we just arrived. So
they just arrived, and how long will your platoon be stationed here?
4 months.
4 months. We got some cars coming here. So Yonatan, 21 years old, has been serving in the army for 3 years, and it looks like Sanchanim, which is one of the elite units here in Israel. It's known as the paratroopers. It's actually based off of the paratroopers in the United States Army, the 101, right? Paratroopers 101, very, very famous brigade in American military as well. And where are you from? I'm from Givat Shmuel. Wonderful. And anybody have a question? Anybody want to type in a question real quick for Yonatan, who's been serving here? He's going to be here in Chevron, protecting all of us while we visit here, those who are living here. Please, God, there shouldn't be any incidents during the time that you're here. We know that there were in the past. Of course, there's not going to be any more incidents again in the future. But if there's no questions, I just really want to just say thank you, Toda, Rabba. You know, I'll mention this, and I heard this from Charlie Harari. Some of you guys have maybe been on a tour with him, but you know, we grow up in America. I'm American. I've been here for a while, but American. We grow up in America, and we have these heroes, right? Who are our heroes? Superman, Spider-Man. I'm sure you had them as heroes at one time too, right? Little Michael Jordan, right? I would quote a football player from Jacksonville, but none of those are probably your heroes. But you know, our sports stars, our music star, we have these heroes. But as we get older, right? I'm 43 right now. As we get older and we mature, we realize that our real heroes, Yonatan, are you, really. And we know that you've sacrificed so much of your time and are willing really to sacrifice the ultimate price. And for that, we can never repay you. But all we can give you is our prayers and our gratitude. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, wait. Somebody said Kol Kavod. I didn't get the name, but everybody who's tuning in right now, they are all praising you. Thank you, Yonatan. So here's my little Ford Focus. We're going to jump on inside. I'll roll down the windows so we get a little bit of a better view. But while I'm driving, I got just a couple minutes drive, not even really. But this would be a great time if anybody has a question. I'm gonna try and back out of here. These ancient city streets here that were built for horse and buggy. And not only that, I get to reverse out of here. Rabbi Avi, you got anything there? Any questions?
Everybody's just enthralled by you. There's so far no questions. So just keep up doing.
Okay. That's either I'm doing a good job or a bad job.
Well, everybody's still on, so I'd say a good job.
All right. Thank God. Thank God for that. Thank you. I appreciate the update. I'm going to take the camera while I'm driving, just to stick out the window. You can see here's another guard, because the 3% that Jews are allowed to use doesn't mean that Arabs aren't allowed to use it. It's just the 97% the Jews aren't allowed to go. So those two guys that just passed us were Arabs. But here you can see a little bit of the modern city of Chevron. Zoom in there a little bit. And Chevron's, for the most parts, has some very, very wealthy neighborhoods. They have 5-star restaurants and nice hotels here as well. And a lot of the residents of Chevron, the Arab residents we're talking about right now, work in construction. And there's a lot, obviously you need your professionals, your doctors and your lawyers. And so you have a lot of that here in the city of Chevron. And the 3% that you can, on a full day tour, not a 45-minute to an hour tour, we can walk through some of those neighborhoods, and you can see some of the beautiful, beautiful homes that they have. This section, not so much, because this really is the Jewish section historically as well, that was partially destroyed in 1948. This is the checkpoint to get to the other side of Chevron. So only Arabs are allowed to go through there. Jews aren't allowed to go through, but that's where they go through to the other side.
How many Jews live in Chevron?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact number, but you got roughly, I would say, about 300 families that live here. You have a city called Kiryat Arba, which is literally like a 3-minute drive from here. And that is a much larger population. And you probably have about 7,000 people who live in Kiryat Arba. What we're traveling through right now, this was all the Jewish area. Most of it was destroyed in 1948. And the king of Jordan built a marketplace. And that's why these all look like, these all used to be stores. They built a marketplace here on top of the ruins of the Jewish homes. And that's why they're all closed right now, because obviously there's a huge legal battle that's going on trying to, hold on one second, we're gonna let this car pass. And then I'm gonna sneak in front of that Land Cruiser and park right here. Where was I? So, I don't know.
Legal battle.
Oh, there's a huge, thank you. There's huge legal battle going on trying to redeem some of that property and return it to Jewish hands. Some of it has been, like here you can see this big new modern apartment building that was built probably about 30 years ago. There's the Beit Shalom that's being rebuilt right now. Beit Romema is being built right now. And so there is actually a campaign right now. You guys are all welcome to check out the Chevron Fund. It's a wonderful website that talks about the history of Chevron and what's going on here. But they are trying to move, trying to build so the families that already want to move here can move here. But right now we are in front of the Beit Hadassah Hospital, the original Hadassah Hospital here in Israel, and a wonderful organization. They celebrated their centennial not so long ago, maybe, gosh, I can't even remember, but must have been maybe no more than 10 years ago, that's for sure, about 8 years ago. And they didn't visit the city of Chevron. Now, obviously, that was a political decision, but this is the original Hadassah Hospital, Beit Hadassah over here. And inside, when you come here on your family trip and come on a congregation trip and you come visit here, inside now on the lower level, they have a fantastic museum about the history of Chevron, including the massacre. And that's what I just want to talk a little bit about here right now. In 1929, The Arab people who were living here in Israel were ruled by what's known as a grand mufti. What does it mean, a grand mufti? A grand mufti is the not only the political leader but also the spiritual leader of an Arab community, and his name was Sheikh Husseini. And Sheikh Husseini lied to the people of Chevron and said that we had destroyed the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right, the Temple Mount, and killed hundreds, if not thousands, of Arabs. And the community, the Arab community here, rebelled against the Jewish residents with all types of rudimentary weapons, right? Axes and big pieces of wood and pitchforks, and yes, knives and some guns as well. And they killed 69 innocent men, women, and children. And this hospital, Beit Hadassah, let's just step inside a little bit and you'll get a nice little view of it. As you can see, it's got some really beautiful stonework here. But this beautiful building, this hospital, didn't just treat Jews, right? That's not the Jewish way. It treated all those who were sick and all those that needed healing. So many of the Arab residents of Chevron who came here for treatment from a good Jewish doctor, the next day they turned around and they killed those doctors. And they cut off their hands and their feet and they tortured people to death. Again, I don't know who's here and I don't know how many children are with us, but you can look it up. I mean, they did mutilations. They mutilated their victims before finishing them off. And they did the unthinkable to our sons and our daughters. And, like I said, not to get too graphic, but it was a terrible, terrible, terrible moment. And the British who were in charge, we have to remember the British were in charge of Israel from 1917 to 1948. The British were controlling the city of Chevron, and they did not approach the Arab community and the leaders of Chevron and try and stop it, but rather it lasted for about 3 days. We're talking about carnage for 3 days, until finally a British soldier had enough of what he was witnessing. And all it took was one shot of his gun in the air. And what did the Arabs do? They all fled. That's all it took. One shot in there, and it could have stopped right there. But they did nothing. And then instead of approaching the Arab community, what did they do? Shalom. Instead of approaching the Arab community, what did they do? Or instead of approaching them and saying this, what did they say? They didn't say, I'm so sorry. Instead of approaching the Arab community and saying, hey, this isn't the way civilized people behave. You can't do this to your fellow man. What did they do instead? They went to the Jewish community and said, it's no longer safe for you here in the city of Chevron. And they forcibly evicted the entire community. And they forced them to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, okay, that's wonderful. They forced them somewhere else into the land. But for the first time, basically, since the days of Abraham, since the days of Abraham, this was one of the first times no Jews in the city of Chevron. In our holy city of Chevron, there was no Jews from 1929 until 1967. Now, some of you have been to Yad Vashem. Maybe some of you have been there to Yad Vashem with me. And I always tell people, when you go to Yad Vashem, just like any museum, you're going to find something there that you did not like, or they should have done better, right? We always know best. Monday, what they call that Monday morning quarterback. So my pet peeve about Yad Vashem is they do not have a large enough section about this Grand Mufti, Sheikh Husseini, who instigated the riots here, the massacre, the pogrom here in Chevron. But they only give him a small little section. But what does this have to do with the Holocaust, with the show of World War II? Well, Sheikh Husseini was a big fan of Adolf Hitler, as I'm sure you can imagine. And he actually got the ear of Adolf. And he said, come here to the land of Israel, come here to Palestine, come here to the British mandates, and help us solve our Jewish problem. We need a final solution for those pesky, stubborn, stiff-necked people who live here. Well, the British were fighting the Nazis and fighting the Germans, and they say, hey, you're on the German side, you're not on our side, you're out of here. And they threw Sheikh Husseini out of the land of Israel. Shalom. They threw Sheikh Husseini out of the land of Israel. He first went to Lebanon, he went somewhere else, and he ended up in Germany. And he ended up actually becoming a advisor to Adolf Hitler. And he was one of the proponents of building the gas chambers and the mass murder of Jews throughout Europe, hoping to bring that machine to the Middle East and back here to the land of Israel. And he even went so far as bringing an entire brigade of SS officers, followed by a huge number, we're talking thousands of Bosnian Muslims, and almost completely wiped out the entire Jewish community of Croatia. This is Sheikh Husseini. This was the Grand Mufti. This was the leader of the Arab people who were living here in the land of Israel. I can't call them Palestinians because, as I mentioned last week, the name Palestine to refer to the Arabs who lived here was only coined in 1964. Shalom. So this is the story, the unfortunate story of the end of the ancient community of Chevron in 1929. But of course, as Jews always do, we stand back up, we brush off our knees, and we try again, and we do better than we did the last time. We're constantly refining, we're constantly improving, we're constantly trying to be better than they were the day before, and we'll finally be able to rebuild here in our holy city and finally be able to return to the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in 1967. And it's an amazing story how that all took place. And we're going to share that story when we are in front of the building that surrounds that double cave that I've mentioned a number of times already. So let's jump back into the car. Shalom. We're going to jump back into the car and we are going to drive another minute or two till we get to the famous building that surrounds the cave. And while we do that, again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in. Rabbi Avi will speak them out. Just took a little schluck of water. I'll take that again. Stick it out the window. Oops, window's not down. All right. I hope you guys can stick in. What time is it? It's 5:30. We start at 4:30. So I know I'm going a little bit over time. We did start a little late, but if you can hang with us for another, I would say 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, so that you can have, don't hear anything? Oh, speaking too fast. Shalom.
No, we hear you. You're good. And take as much time as you good, David.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi. Because this is just so important. Though what I'm going to be sharing with you as well is just so important. Again, this was all the Jewish neighborhood here. Up, yes.
Around here?
We're going to pass through it right now. So this is all part of the Jewish area, which was destroyed after 1929, after those riots. And the king of Jordan at that time, after 1948, built the marketplace. And so even during the daytime, it's not just that it's nighttime, even during the daytime, this is all closed. And please God, I'm sure one day it'll happen that we'll finally be able to rebuild here and return to the old Jewish neighborhood. Now, Rabbi Avi wanted me to take you here to the old neighborhood, or the neighborhood that's known as the Avraham Avinu neighborhood. And we're not going to really go into it, but I will say that there's an old synagogue inside that dated back, I want to say about 700 years. And it was destroyed, obviously, in 1929. And it, look at these kids playing here. This is great, huh? Just to be able to see that these are Jewish kids who live here in Chevron and in this neighborhood that you can see right here. And this is the neighborhood, the Avraham Avinu neighborhood over here. And the old shul was destroyed. It was used to house the donkeys. And 1967, when we finally were able to return, we preserved and renovated and returned that old ancient synagogue back to its glory. Thank God. I'm just going to back out of here right now because we are going to head to Marat Machpelah. And I just got to do my little.
David, someone wants to know, is the hospital still in use, or it's not a hospital? It's not in use anymore?
It's not a hospital anymore. It is apartments. There is a school in there as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you have the museum. At one time, this building had been renovated and Jewish families had moved into it, but the army came and demolished it because they deemed it illegal. So they demolished the Jewish community that was there. I'm going to follow the rules here and go around the circle. And you can see there is a seminary. And by the looks of it, it looks like it's mostly Americans. Well, there's a little seminary right here that's also doing a little tour of Chevron. Baruch Hashem. We hosted a wonderful woman, a young lady, 19 years old, this Shabbat, who is on a program here in Israel. We hosted her for Shabbat. It's one of the things that COVID, one of the things that we miss as a outcome of COVID, which is being able to host large groups at our house for Shabbat. My wife and I host many, many, many groups. In fact, when we lived in Jerusalem, we just moved about a year ago to Gush Etzion, to Efrat, which is between Chevron and Yerushalayim. But we used to host many groups, and we were known as an open house. So we got everybody from all different walks of life: Jews, non-Jews, religious, not religious, not so religious. And we really love that. And since COVID, we haven't been able to host large groups, but whenever we can, we'll take in a seminary or a yeshiva student or somebody doing a gap year program. So if any of you guys know anybody who's here for the year, let their parents know, or if you're one of those parents, then you can send your kids to us and we'd be happy to host them. Park here and walk up because I don't want to waste our time. And oftentimes you can't go all the way. You can't park at the front because it's full. And here it's going to be many more people. So I'm going to put my mask on. And was it last? No, it wasn't last. 2 weeks ago, we had the Torah Parshan Hadassah, which is, it's in English, the life of Sarah, but really it talks about the death of Sarah. And it talks about the purchase of the cave. And on that Shabbat, you usually would have tens of thousands of people who ascend to Chevron. And I was here once, maybe 15 years ago, my younger days, my yeshiva days. And I camped out somewhere here on this grass, along with tens of thousands of other people, celebrating the purchase of Marat Machpelah, the double cave, and spending Shabbat here. Now, inside the building, which I'm going to hopefully be able to take you inside because they limit the number of people who can go in there due to COVID. But also, when we do go in there, so I'm sure we'll be able to, the internet, the reception is not so great. These are 2,000-year-old walls, and they're probably about 3 or 4 feet thick. Not very good for the Wi-Fi signals to go through, but we will do our best. And inside is divided into 2 sections, right? You have 3, what's known in English as a Cenotaph. You have 3 grave markers. And a Cenotaph is really just a point of focus that you can think about those that are buried in the vicinity of the marker. And those three different cenotaphs, or six, but three different sections, are the three couples who live here. And who are we talking about? We're talking about Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah. And only two of them are open to Jews. And the third section, Yitzchak and Rivka, is open to the Arabs who believe that Hagar and Yishmael are buried there. And this was the servant woman of Sarah, also who then became one of the wives of Abraham, and who gave birth to Abraham's oldest son, Yishmael. So they pray in there, but 10 days out of the year, they open it up to Jewish worshippers, usually during Chol HaMoed of Passover and Sukkot, and as well as the Shabbat of Chayei Sarah, which I just mentioned. People come here, tens of thousands of people, and they open up the whole place, and everybody's singing and dancing and praying and being together, and it's very, 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 very special. Let's just talk a little bit about the liberation of Chevron, okay? 1967, the Egyptian army blockades the Straits of Tiran, which is in the Red Sea, and is part of the international waterways. And the route that the ships leaving the port of Eilat would travel to the Far East, major trade route for Israel. And I'm sure many of you know, some of you might not realize, that when you mess around with trade routes or international water or water supplies of another country, even if it's not, directly in their boundaries, international waters are accessible to all. That is an act of war. And that's very important to understand, because Israel did not start the Six-Day War of 1967. It began with the Egyptians. Swallowed a little gnat, flew in. Should have brought my water with me. But the international waters, they blocked it. That was the first act of war. We did fire the first bullet. We pulled the trigger first. You don't have water, do you, on you? Got a little bug. Excuse me. All right, hopefully I'll be okay. So, so the Six-Day War begins. Israel then launches an attack on the Egyptian military. 2 days later, the Jordanians begin pummeling with rockets and artillery shells Jerusalem. Israel will counter that attack, and within 36 hours, completely destroy the Jordanian offensive and liberate the old city, which we still celebrate on the 27th of ER, not like but 2 weeks after Independence Day for Israel. This is on the Hebrew calendar. That year, I believe it was June, and June 7th, and they set their eyes towards the holy city of Chevron. The chief rabbi of the IDF was a man by the name of Shlomo Goren. You know what? I'm going to give you some money to go to that little, call it there, and pick up a glass of water, or if you could just get my water out of the car. So sorry. Thanks. I'm going to try and hold this myself, because I'm sure you guys have all swallowed a bug before. It's very irritating. Let's just adjust this a little bit. So they liberate Jerusalem, and they're going to set their eyes on Chevron. Shlomo Goren, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, Rabbi General Goren, who is the head chaplain, the chief rabbi of the IDF, He is well known. You've probably seen his picture. Anybody who's looked at pictures of Jerusalem's liberation, he's the guy who's blown the shofar there at the Western Wall. He raises the Israeli flag on Har Bayit on the Temple Mount. And he is so excited to finally be able to come to Chevron to pray by the tombs of our matriarchs and our patriarchs. And so he rushes to an area that would eventually be built up to be the city of Efrat, which is where I live, where the various brigades are coming together in order to lead the offensive towards the city of Chevron the following day. And he asks to give a speech to the soldiers. It's 3:30 in the morning. Most of these soldiers haven't slept very much in the last 24, 48 hours. And he tells them that we are going from victory to victory, from throne to throne. If today is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, tomorrow is Yom Chevron. Because it was in the city of Chevron that David HaMelech ruled for the first 7.5 years. And we are returning to our mamas and our papas. And he ended with that, and he told the commanders, you better make sure you take me to Chevron with you. I want to be there on this glorious day. Well, he woke up a little bit earlier than everybody else. He was very excited. And when he woke up, he saw that there was a few tanks in the area and a few soldiers kind of fussing about. And he thought that most of the brigade had left already. So he screamed to his driver. And he says, get in the Jeep. We're going to Chevron. We have to catch up to the rest of the soldiers. And they're driving from Efrat. It's like a 20-minute drive. Maybe then it was a little bit longer. The roads weren't so well. And they drive to the city of Chevron. And they're constantly driving. He's like, where are the soldiers? Where are the soldiers? Where are the tanks? What's going on here? Just keep on going. They've got to be in the city. They get to the city. They're driving through the streets of Chevron, and they don't see another IDF soldier. And they begin to get a little bit nervous because they're saying to themselves, wait a second, maybe they're not here. We're all here by ourselves. What's going to happen? Well, then they started to observe a little bit more, and they started to look at the building, they started to look at the windows, and they noticed out of all the windows and on the roofs, they saw white flags. Some of them were actual flags, some of them were bed sheets, some of them were pillowcases, but they saw these white flags, and they had realized that the entire city of Hebron, knowing that the IDF was coming here this day, had prepared a unanimous surrender. Not one shot was fired, and Hebron was liberated by one man, the chief rabbi of the IDF, Rabbi Shlomo Goren. Well, when he arrived here to this building, he said, take me to the seventh step. What do I mean by the seventh step? Well, just on over here, you can see that there are some people lighting some candles and offering some prayers. I'm just going to put my mask on. That's why the camera's a little wobbly. And I said, take me to the seventh step. You see, for about 700 years, it was here that the Jews could get the closest to Merat Machpelah, to the actual double cave. And you can actually see that the walls are charred. They're blackened from all the candles from hundreds of years, people lighting them here in memory of our mamas and papas, of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Well, these were the seventh stair. There was more stairs that led up that way. And behind those trees, you have the original entrance into the building. You can see there's a little light right there, right? That was the original entrance. And this is where they could pray. He said, take me to the seventh stair. And then he looked at, hold on one second. Thank you so much. So so he came here, and I guess maybe some shots were fired in the liberation of Chevron, because he took out his Uzi, right? This is an Israeli weapon, and he shot the lock and the door of Merat Machpelah. And for the first time in 700 years, Jews were once again allowed to return to the inside to pray at the graves of our forefathers and our foremothers. And Chevron was almost officially back in the hands of the Jewish people. What do I mean by almost? It wasn't officially surrendered. the mayor of Chevron came and greeted Shlomo Goren here inside this building that we're going to talk about momentarily, and offered the keys of the city in an official surrender. And Rabbi Goren said, this is a holy place for both of us. This is a holy place for the world. This is a place of spirituality and not a place for militaries and politics. And so they left this building and they went to the town hall, to the mayor's office, and it was there that Chevron would be officially surrendered to the IDF, to the state of Israel, to the Jewish people. And for the first time, people of all faiths could pray together and in peace here in the city of Chevron, as well as Jerusalem and all other places here in Israel. It never existed before during the previous eras of the land of Israel. I'm just going to grab my water, and we are going to swing around and where there's a little bit more light, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of the building itself. Even more light. So, you know, there are a lot of tombs of righteous ones here in Israel that people from around the world flock to when they visit in order to pray by their side. And this idea of visiting a tomb really originates right here in Hebron during the biblical narrative of the 12 spies, right? The 12 spies were those that came and scouted out the land at the beginning of the Exodus when we left slavery, we left Egypt being led by Moshe Rabbeinu. And 10 of the spies came back with a report of futility. We'll never be able to conquer. Those people are so big, the land's so strong, like it's not worth it. Let's go back to Egypt. 2 of them came back and said, yes, the people are big, the land is strong, but it is beautiful as well, and Hashem promised to us, and we need to go. One of those was a man by the name of Yeshua, Joshua, who would then lead the Jewish people across the Jordan River and into the land of Israel, and he was the successor of Moses. The other one was a man by the name of Caleb. And how did Caleb merit the strength to be able to give such a just report? Well, it tells us in the Medrash that he first came here to the city of Chevron and threw himself on top of the tomb of Abraham and prayed, not to Abraham, because that would be idol worship, but he prayed to Hashem in the merit of Abraham, in the merit of the tzaddikim, in the merit of all those that came before me. Please, Hashem, hear my words and give me strength. And this is where the idea comes from, going to graves and going to tombs. There are many of them all over Israel. Some of them are deeply rooted and deeply founded, and there's no doubt that those places. Other ones, it requires a lot of faith. However, I will say, without a doubt, this is the burial plot of Abraham, Sarah, Yitzhak, Rivka, Yaakov, and Leah. And I can say that without a doubt, because since their days, since their lives, since they were buried, this place has been revered by all peoples, whether later on they were Christians or Muslims, or even earlier, whether they were Edomians, right? Everybody saw Abraham as a prince of God and the man who preached monotheism about the one true God. And so this place was always revered and always honored and always taken well cared for, and was never lost and never laid in ruins when nobody was coming here. The building that I'm leaning on right now, do these stones look familiar to you? They should. You know, I'm doing a Hanukkah tour in the old city, and somebody wanted me, wanted me to make a little promo video for it. community in Atlanta, and I thought about just doing it right here, as if I was in front of the Kotel, because it's easier for me to come to Chevron from my house than there. Because this looks like the Kotel, because these are Herodian stones. And this is a building that was built by King Herod, the same man who built the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, Masada, Caesarea, all these places that you know in Israel. He also built the building on top of that double cave, Marat Machpelah. The only difference between Jerusalem and here is that Chevron was never destroyed. The building was never destroyed because everybody honored it. So the building wasn't destroyed and it's still here. It is the oldest active building in the entire world. It's really quite impressive. Now inside, probably just underneath this section is what most experts believe is where that double cave is located. And why is it called the double cave? It's called the double cave. It's called the double cave because in addition to the burial place of Sarah that Abraham purchased, it is also, according to our tradition, the burial place of Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Chava. How did Abraham know that? Now, this is an incredible, incredible story. And for me, this is my inspiration of Chevron. And it's one of the reasons that I come here frequently. I'm 20 minutes, 25 minutes from my house when I live in Efrat. And I do come here frequently. So in the Parsha where the three angels visit Abraham, I believe it was 2 weeks ago. It might have just been last week. It could have been 1 week or 2 weeks ago. Where the angels visit Abraham. And he immediately says, come, have some bread, have some water, right? And then he tells his son to go fetch a big calf and a cow, and he tells Sarah to make some bread, and he makes this huge feast. Well, according to the Medrash and the Kabbalah, that one of the cows that they wanted to slaughter for this meal, for these what he thought were Bedouins, for these nomads, but were really angels, ran away, and he chased that heifer to a cave. He chased that heifer to a cave, and there he saw candles burning, and he smelled an aroma, and he understood at that moment that this was a portal to Gan Eden, that this was a portal to the spiritual world. Now, Yerushalayim is in a state of Chorban, which means that it's destroyed. It is in a state of ruins. The temple does not stand there anymore. But when you rearrange the Hebrew letters of Chorban, you get the word Chevron. And many mystics believe that when Yerushalayim and the temple, which is that portal between us and the infinite, between the finite and the infinite, that metaphysical kiss between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his creation, when it's in a state of ruin, that the back door for your prayers to Shemaim is the city of Chevron. Because the word Chevron actually comes from the word chibur, right? Which means to connect. It means to connect, like cheverim, right? Friends, connection. It's a relationship. Really, you want to say, I heard from Yishai Fleischer that the city of Chevron is the city of romance, right? It's the city of a relationship between a man and a woman, Abraham and Sarah, who give birth to a family, who will give birth to a nation, the nation of Israel. And so Chevron, in many ways, is that back door entrance to Shemaim, to heaven. And that's why Abraham was willing to pay those 400 silver weights, those 400 silver shekel, an enormous amount of money, equivalent to millions of dollars today, in order to bury his wife Sarah at this location, at this place. And that's why Chevron has been special for all of these years. So let's see if we can actually go inside, although I do just want to put a disclaimer out there right now that the internet inside, due to these thick walls, is not very good. And it might be a little bit staticky, but we're going to see what we can do. So we're going to continue filming. We're going to go in there. We're going to see what we can do. And if it's too bad, we're going to come back out. But if we get disconnected, terribly sorry for that. You're going to have to come in person. But it's been a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous time with you. And I hope that you enjoyed this tour very, very much. But Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll be able to see some on the inside and then come out. And then if there's still people who are around, we can do a little bit of Q&A. So we're just going to come around this way and see, first of all, there's limited amount of people allowed inside. They might not even allow us inside, but please God, it'll work for us. Take it. Shalom. יופי. וופ. זה אפשר? זה אפשר להיכנס? יופי.
אתה איתו כאילו ביחד?
כן, רק ביחד.
זה מצלמה כאילו של מי?
כן.
של הפלאפון?
כן.
אתה לא יכול להיכנס עם הדבר הזה.
Really?
הפלאפון אפשר.
רק הפלאפון? אוקיי, בסדר, אין בעיה. מה אתם רוצים שאנחנו עושים את זה?
אתם יש לכם נשק משהו חד?
לא.
רק אם אתה יכול להיכנס בלי זה? פלאפון זה, פלאפון.
You know what? I'll just take it. You want to wait out here? Great. תודה רבה. All right. For some reason, they don't want to take the djembe that I use to keep it steady. But here we go. I'm holding it with my hand, and Phil is remaining outside. Again, this is not the original entrance. The original entrance was where the seventh stair was, where Shlomo Gorn entered. This was built later on in order to access the building. And this is very, very exciting to be able to take you here with me right now. So this little section here was built later on. Who were the people who prevented Jews from entering there? So in 1267, the Muslims gained control of the land of Israel for the final time from the Crusaders, the European Christians. And they prevented all non-Muslims from entering Marat Machpelah. And they also built a little bit here as well. And so they built this outer entrance. But that wall in front of you there, that is still the wall that we saw outside. And here on the mezuzah, you can see the big, beautiful mezuzah. Look how big that is. You can see my hand, how big that is. So you can see it says Sha'ar Gan Eden. This is the gateway to Gan Eden. So let's go on inside the Gan Eden. And that Muslim group that kicked the Jews out, they were known as the Mamluks. That is their typical architecture. If you've been to Jerusalem, you've seen that, red, white around all their door frames and their doors. That's Mamluk architecture. And this is why the internet does not work so well here. As you can see, the thick walls, again, Herodian walls, the same style that you see in Jerusalem. And I said 3-4 feet. This is probably more like 8 feet thick. So let's go on inside and see what we can manage. All right, those are all
David, you froze. Okay, guys, just hold on for a couple minutes. I'm going to try to get him to come back on outside of the tomb.
Okay. Listen, Rabbi Avi.
Yes.
You can see now, so you can see it froze. So I'm like underneath the sky right now. This is the wall of Herod's wall, but I can't really go inside anymore because we are going to lose reception. So do you want to do a little Q&A right now? Can you see me here?
Yeah, I could see you. You're clear right now. So yeah, we could do some Q&A. Guys, you guys can unmute yourselves. If anybody has any questions, go ahead. I unmuted any participants that are muted. If anybody has any questions for David, go ahead.
First of all, if anybody wants to leave too, I will not be offended. I just want to say thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Rabbi Avi and Eitz Chaim Synagogue, for giving me this opportunity to bring Chevron to you all in Jacksonville today while the borders of Israel are closed.
Any questions or comments? Go for it.
Have the tombs ever been opened? Have the actual kevers ever been opened?
Great question. Great question. The kevers have not been opened that we know of. There were 2 incidences that people did go down in the room across there. That white room over there. There's it's inaccessible to us. That's the Muslim side that I was referring to. That they divided it. That's open some days of the year for Jewish prayer. And during one of those times in the 80s, they actually lowered somebody down there, and they have some footage and some pictures of what's down there. And what we saw was a long tunnel and some stairs that led into a room. And there was you could see the leftover impressions from candles that were burned there. There were ancient clay vessels that were down there. But nobody's ever gone all the way. We don't have any record of anybody going all the way in. Anybody else here want to chime in with a question?
Will the 3% always stay that way, or will they increase it, the Israeli government, to control more of Hebron?
Well, there's no discussion to increase it, but please God, it will be fully liberated, and one day we'll be able to roam freely and safely throughout all of Chevron. I just want to say hello to my kids. If you guys swipe through, you can see my beautiful daughter Hannah Kayla and my handsome son Binyamin. Hi Binyamin. Hi Hannah Kayla. Any other questions from anybody?
Bye, Daddy. I'm muting myself.
All right, good boy. That's right. Everybody, even my kid's 6 years old, and you know they had Zoom classes already. Oh, you can hear the call to prayer now, right? Because part of this is a mosque, so you can hear the call to prayer from the Muslims very loud.
You don't need to. No,
Any other questions or comments for David?
I want to say something.
You're not on. You're not on.
Oh, come on.
You go ahead, Abe.
Okay.
Shirley just muted me, so forgive me. I wanted to say to David that years ago, we went on an Eged tour to Hebron, but David's presentation today was far deeper than what we had on the Eged tour, and I want to thank him for that. I also want to thank Ken Jacobs for sponsoring, and we certainly appreciate it and had the honor to join you guys.
Well, I also want to thank Ken Jacobs for sponsoring that as well. And I just noticed that your last name, Abe, is Bielski.
Yes.
Any relationship to the Partisans?
I only wish, but my family's story is very similar. We come from Vilna, and I was born in Vilna. The stories from the Bielski brothers is not that far away. However,
Right.
From my discussions with the family in Israel, we have no relationship.
The reason why I ask is that my wife's grandfather, who our son's named after, was the head of the military wing of the Bielskis. But we'll move on now to if anybody else has any other questions about
I actually
Hebron.
have could I ask something as well? Whenever I go to Machpelah, we put a red string around the coffin of supposedly Rachel or Rivka, whatever. What is in that? Are there any remains in that coffin?
So that is that's a cenotaph. It's a grave marker. It's not the coffin. Oftentimes we get confused because we see the big box above ground. We think that's the coffin. It's a cenotaph, which is a grave marker. And yes, that is believed as one of the primary locations, a few locations that people believe to be the burial place, not of Rivka. Rivka is buried here. That is the burial place of Rachel. And the idea is to wrap that string around the cenotaph, the area of the grave marker, 7 times. And there's certain tehillim, certain psalms that you say, and people use that red string both as for memory, as a memento, but also as a sign of protection.
David, you're cutting in and out, so maybe like move back outside a little bit.
Okay, great idea. I'm gonna head out there. Let me just put on my mask.
Any other questions? or
This
comments?
is Beth. This is Beth talking.
Go ahead, Beth.
So I heard that the general who did get control of the cave did go down the steps to go see the graves of Abraham and Sarah. But then when he got down to a certain point, he hit like a glass wall and he couldn't go down anymore. And when he came back up, that's when he said, okay, nobody's allowed to go back down, because it kind of freaked him out. So that's why we're not allowed to go back, go all the way down to see the actual grave.
Well, whether he went down or not, that's definitely not the reason why we're not allowed to. Not because, like you said, nobody should go down there anymore. Mostly, I would probably say that that's a very much a political reason for not trying to explore that area a little bit, at the very least. The story of Shlomo Goren going all the way down, I'm not familiar with that. I do not believe that he went down, because the opening to get there is very, very small. In fact, when they put somebody to go down there in the 80s, it was a young girl who was very, very thin as well. I don't know that story. I'm not saying that that story did not happen. I'm just not familiar with the story of Reb Shlomo Goren going down.
Okay, anybody else? Thank you, Beth, for that. Anybody else?
Is it safer, like, like say a family goes for a trip to Israel and they rent a car, is it safe for them to drive to Hebron?
So so you drive through some Arab areas. The streets are well maintained, well guarded, and used frequently by many Israelis. So yes, it's safe. However, I think the average American family driving to Chevron on their own without a guide would probably get seriously freaked out by the surrounding views and some of the people that might approach them. That being said, it is safe, but of course, anywhere in the disputed territories, there's always a possibility of an occurrence happening, but it's highly unlikely. I take families that want to go here. Of course, you're limited. You have 10 days. And anybody who this is going to be a nerve-wracking experience bringing their kids out here, I'd rather just bring them to another place that's going to connect them deeply to our stories, to our forefathers, to our foremothers, to have the experience that they deserve, really.
Mm-hmm.
Just another comment. When we were on the Eged tour, some of the kids that David is talking about were throwing rocks at our bus. So I certainly wouldn't go there on my own.
I've been here more than 100 times. I don't know how, countless times. I've never had an incident myself. Thank God. Hopefully, we'll never have one.
Thank you so much. This is an absolutely phenomenal tour.
Well,
I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to hear that. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's very special for me to be able to do what I love to do. So thank you.
I feel homesick. I want to go back.
You should. All right, Rabbi
Yeah,
Ali.
so I just wanted to I just wanted to thank first of all Rabbi Feigenbaum for coordinating this event, and Ken and Allison Jacobs. But David, I just wanted to say it's a phenomenal presentation. We're learning the weekly parshiot now of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and it's one thing just to hear about it, in the shul and read about it in the books, but to see firsthand, the alleyways where Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov walked, it's such an amazing opportunity that you gave us to connect with our heritage, and we can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We're going to say goodbye to David. Again, as David mentioned, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. I can give you David's information. God willing, we're going to work with David. Maybe March time, we'll do other cities in Israel.
Bye, Daddy.
As you see, the time's getting dark outside, so we're going to wait till it's going to get lighter again, that we could do our Sunday mornings tours of Israel, and we're really looking forward to that. Just one more reminder, please join us for future programmings. Flyers will be coming out. We have a very special program for December. We're going to interview different people from around either Jacksonville and around the world, get to know about their fascinating lives and their relationship with in their Jewish life and their secular world, and many other speakers to come. So please look forward to that. And again, a big thank you to Ken and Allison Jacob for sponsoring our new initiative, Chachma B'Choref. Wishing everyone a beautiful day. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Great to see you again, David. It's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all in person sometime soon.
Likewise.
All right.
Take care, everyone. I'm going to be ending the meeting.